Hello and welcome to How to Communicate Confidently with the Board and Executive Leadership Team as an Introverted Woman. And whilst I'm waiting for people to come online as you join, please let me know which part of the world you're joining me from today. I always like to see where you're showing up from. And I'll give it a few seconds, a minute, so that more people can come online, and then I'll get going. And if you're watching the replay, then also let me know where you're joining from, because I do come back and read the comments. So yes, please share where you're joining from today. So I'm going to get going. I can't see how many people are online, and I'm just going to assume that some of you have come on and that some of you will join as the session gets going. So this is how to communicate confidently with the board and executive leadership team as an introverted woman. And so this is for you if you find yourself second guessing when you're speaking with senior leaders, or you stay quiet when you know you've got something of value to add, or you feel that your voice just isn't being heard at the top. Does that describe your experience? And if so, just share in the comments what your experience is. And for those of you that don't know me, I'm Carol Stewart. I'm an executive career leadership coach, speaker, trainer, and author of the book Quietly Visible, Leading with Influence and Impact as an Introverted Woman. And I specialize in coaching introverted leaders and those from represented groups, in particularly women. And I coach leaders to lead with confidence, influence, and impact, to overcome all those barriers that get in the way of them being great leaders. And so what I'm going to be sharing today is why many introverted women feel less confident speaking up to executive leadership or those in authoritative those of authoritative figures. And I'll share some mindset shifts that change how you show up, and some communication strategies that will help you to be seen, to be heard, and for your value to be respected and appreciated. And so, first of all, it's helpful to understand what's getting in the way of speaking up confidently, boldly, asserting yourself, challenging those who are more senior or those who have more of an authoritative figure. And if you are aware and want to share, please share in the chat. And some common reasons that I come across in my work are fears of being judged, fear of appearing incompetent, fear of getting it wrong, fear that you don't have anything worthwhile to add, fear of making a fool of yourself. There may be certain workplace dynamics that amplify you doubting yourself. So the environment that you are in may not be one where you feel like you belong. It might not be one where you feel psychologically safe. And this can be particularly challenging for introverted women, because in being places such as meetings where there's a lot of emphasis on responding on the spot, not having time to process information before speaking or giving a response, can add to the fears of speaking up. And do let me know what your experience is in the comments, or send me a private message and let me know what your experience is. So what story are you telling yourself when you're in the room in those sorts of situations with those who are a lot more senior than you, or who are more domineering or more authoritative than you? And another reason which I find quite common in my work is the cultural background of the leader. So many of the leaders that I coach, they come from cultures where they've been brought up to respect their elders or to respect those in senior or authoritative positions. And as a result, in meetings, it can be challenging to speak up and say what they want to say or express themselves as they want to express themselves, because it has been ingrained in them that they should respect those in authority. They should respect those who are older than them. And to give you some examples of this, I had one particular client who, that was her experience, her cultural background, and as a result, when wanting to challenge executives, senior leaders, she found that difficult to do because it had been so ingrained into her that asserting herself in those sorts of situations, particularly when it came to male executives, she found difficult because of her cultural upbringing. So what is it for you? What is your experience that may be getting in the way of you speaking up and asserting yourself in those sorts of situations? And to shift your mindset and build that belief in yourself, it's about recognizing the belief you may have and what you may hold about yourself or that environment, and changing them, change what you think and believe about yourself, about you think about the others that are in the room, and changing what you believe, because if you can change what you think and believe, you change how you feel. If you can change how you feel, you'll change how you act and behave. And so if you're and I'll give you examples of this. So if your cultural upbringing has been one where you've been brought up that you've got to respect your elders, that you don't challenge those in authority, and that is a deeply held belief, then what you can do is to recognize that your cultural upbringing has a big impact on the way that you're showing up in meetings now. However, you've been appointed to this particular role for a reason, because you were the best person for the role. And with that role comes certain responsibilities, and addressing or putting forward your perspective is part of your role, part of your responsibility. And by reframing how you see yourself, how you see those other people in the room, and shifting what you think and what you believe, that will help to change how you feel and how you act and behave. So recognizing, acknowledging your cultural upbringing and how that served you growing up, but it may not be necessarily be serving you in the context of the workplace and in the environments that you are in, and those senior executives that are around the table or who you need to communicate with, they may be getting something wrong. You may have a very valid point of view that you need to put forward, and by not putting that forward, they're not going to understand that perspective, or they're not going to be challenged, because senior leaders still do need to be challenged. They don't always get it right. They are in their roles for a reason, but they need to hear different perspectives as well. So if a cultural upbringing has been the thing that stops you from challenging and speaking up and communicating as confidently as you would like I said, reframe how you see yourself in those situations, acknowledge your cultural upbringing, and bring those aspects of your cultural upbringing that continue to serve you into your situation, but those that are not serving you in that environment and in those situations, it's all looking at recognizing that the dynamics of the situation that you are in now require you to speak up. And so as a result, your speaking up is not being disrespectful to those senior leaders or those senior executives, what you are doing is you're showing them a different perspective. You're adding value to the conversation by putting your perspective forward. And by not doing so, then they're missing out from a very valuable perspective or very valuable piece of information that you may bring. Other situations that I've experienced where clients have not felt confident or not had the belief in themselves to speak up are when it comes to being different to the majority group. So one particular client who had not been Oxford educated, had gone to their local university, was in rooms with senior executives who were Oxford educated from privileged backgrounds. And so as a result, my client felt that they had a communication problem because they felt that they didn't speak as eloquently and as articulately as those senior executives. But I could tell that they didn't have a communication problem. And I asked what it was like with their peers or with their team members. And it wasn't an issue for them. It was just when they were in the room with those who were much more senior that it became a problem. And so the issue wasn't the fact that they were unable to communicate. The issue was what they thought and believed about themselves in that environment. So they were in a situation where others around them had come from a socio-economically advantaged or privileged background, being Oxford educated, and as a result, they were looking at them and putting themselves down in the process and thinking that they weren't as good as them. But it was by challenging their thinking and what they believed on the matter, recognizing that they had been appointed to the role because they were the best person for it. They deserved to be at that table. They had earned their seat at that table, and the value that they added was just as good as anyone else. And by challenging their thinking and reframing how they saw the situation, reframing things, that helped to change what they thought about themselves and what they believed. And as a result, they were able to feel more confident and also accepting themselves as they were. They hadn't had the same background as them, hadn't had the same privileges as them. Nevertheless, they had still arrived where they'd arrived through their experience and hard work and the skills and the knowledge they had developed over the years. And another situation, to give you an example, a client who, as a child, had been fairly ill and was sort of in and out of hospital, seeing doctors, consultants, and they were mainly men and would be making decisions about my client without any consultation to my client, speaking over them, making decisions about them. So my client felt that they didn't have a voice. And so what had happened as they became an adult and were in situations where there were authoritative figures, those who were more senior, it was like they lost their voice. And so for this particular client, what they did was they reframed their early life experience, recognizing that back then that was how things were done, particularly as a child. It wasn't explained to you what was going on, and that that was back then. Things were different now, and also that as an adult that wasn't helping them, and as an adult they had a job to do, and recognizing the value that they brought to the table, recognizing that those authoritative figures in the room were no better than my client. They may be more senior, but that didn't mean that they were better than my client. It's just that they had got a level of experience that had enabled them to get to a more senior position. And just by challenging what she thought and she believed about herself and changing her perspective, enabled her to feel more confident in those meetings, to speak up and to address any issues or to challenge. And one of the things that she identified as well was that if she didn't get her voice heard, then things wouldn't change. So she needed to get her voice heard in order to bring about change. And so just by changing what she thought and what she believed, that helped to change how she felt. So if this is you, challenge what you think and believe about yourself, what you believe about those senior executives, and ask yourself, well, what is a much more helpful perspective to have? And recognize the value that you are adding by letting your voice be heard. And even if your opinion is not accepted, or even if they don't agree with you, recognize that that is their perspective. It's not you personally, it's that they don't agree with your perspective. And that's okay. It's not all the time people are going to agree with what you have to say. And what can happen in those sorts of situations where you are feeling nervous or fearful about speaking up? It can make you speak much more quicker as a result of just wanting to get out quickly what it is that you have to say, or you don't speak up at all. And if you find that in those sorts of environments, then that you end up speaking a lot quicker just because you just want to hurry up and get it over with, or you don't speak at all, and you find that your heart is beating faster, and you're becoming your hands are sweating, or you're getting some sort of physiological symptoms, then what you can do is some simple grounding exercises that will help you to manage your nervous system. So from being in that heightened state where your heart is racing, or your pulse is beating faster, you're getting that tension in your stomach, just doing some gentle breathing exercises where you breathe in for 4 seconds, hold it for 4 seconds, breathe out for 4 seconds, hold it for 4 seconds, and repeat that a few times. That will help you to slow down, help you to calm your breath, and help you to feel more calmer. And also, if you find that your mind is racing ahead and you're worrying that you might say the wrong thing, or that you might be ridiculed, or that you might be judged, what's happening is your mind is not focusing on the here and now. You're ruminating, you're racing ahead. Acknowledge that you're thinking this, acknowledge those thoughts, but just tell yourself you haven't got time to think and worry about that right now. Right now, you need to focus in on the moment and say what it is that you want to say. Because what's happening is because your mind is ruminating and worrying and imagining the worst possible outcome, that will make you feel more anxious. But by interrupting the thoughts in that way, so it's not just dismissing the thought, because if you just dismiss it, it will continue to bubble up. But it's about managing it by just acknowledging it and telling yourself that you haven't got time to worry about it right now, and that you'll worry about it later. And that allows you to bring your mind back to the present and be in the moment. So when your mind is in the moment and you're present, you're able to think more clearly and more rationally. And another thing that you can do is prepare in advance. Preparation, as someone who's introverted, preparation is key, because oftentimes you may find yourself in situations where you are not having time to think and process information, that you're put on the spot and expected to respond straight away. But you may have a preference for processing information and then having to think about it before speaking. And so by preparing in advance what you want to say, thinking about the outcomes, thinking about any objections that you may have to what you've got to say, you can do a lot of that thinking before you even step in the room. So prepare your message, not writing out word for word like a script what you want to say, but it's just about preparing your message so that you are clear about the outcomes you want and what it is that you need to say. And so that way you can speak from clarity, and you're not trying to remember every single word, because if you're doing that as well, you're focusing on remembering what you want to say, that in itself can trip you up. And to have more gravitas in the room, make use of pauses and slowing down. And so someone who I always admire for the use of pauses in when they're speaking is former President of the USA, Barack Obama. Now, he's well known for using pauses in his speeches, and that is something that I would recommend if you become anxious and you feel that your mind is racing ahead and you start to ramble, is just pause and slow down. And do that whilst you're doing the breathing exercises. Make use of those pauses, and slow yourself down. And speak in structured points. As introverts, we thrive with having a framework. So maybe have some structured points that you want to raise. And don't shrink your voice. So speak clearly, speak boldly. Don't soften your voice. Don't soften your message. You can soften your tone, but not your message. And then make sure that you get your message across. So that's probably all that I want to cover. And I'd just like to remind you that it all starts with thinking about what you're thinking about in those sorts of situations. So challenging what you think and what you believe about yourself, those senior executives, rationalizing what it is that you think about yourself and what those fears are, examining those fears and looking at it as what's a more helpful perspective to have. Reminding yourself that you have earned your seat at the table and you deserve to be there, that you have value to add. Recognizing if it's a cultural upbringing that has made you or ingrained in you that you shouldn't speak up amongst those in authority, or you must respect those in authority. Recognizing that that was your cultural upbringing, but that may not be serving you in the present environment within the workplace, that if you don't speak up, your voice won't be heard. So any questions? Anybody want to share or ask a question? Then please type in the comments and let me know. So what has your experience been? And if you come and watch this on the replay, do share any comments that you have, because I will come along and read them. So I will hang on for a few minutes and see if any questions come up, any comments. And if you are wanting to increase your confidence, influence, and impact, if you haven't completed the free assessment on my website, go to aboundingsolutions.com. There is a free assessment that you can complete there that will give you ideas about areas that you can focus on. And if you want to get my weekly newsletter with information, inspiration, tips and advice, you can also sign up for that at aboundingsolutions.com. So any questions, any comments? And if there isn't, I'll say thank you for those of you that have come online and for those of you that are going to join on the replay. And if you do have any questions or any comments, then please, you can send me a DM if you don't want to ask it publicly. I'm happy for you to send me a DM. But I will hang on one more minute to see if any questions come through. And to let you know, there will be no LinkedIn Live next month. in August. And do also check out my podcast, Quietly Visible Podcast, on YouTube, on Spotify, on Apple Podcasts as well. Okay, well, thank you, everybody. And I'll say goodbye until the next time. Bye.